My name is David Freas. I have a book out. It came out last year. It's called Illegal Maneuvers. It's a mystery involving a car crash because I'm interested in cars. And I have another book coming out October 24th. It's called Payback. It's the story of a dirty cop and people who want to get him and get payback for some of the things he's done. So they're all available through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, both in paperback and ebook format. And Illegal Maneuvers was available through Walmart and Target as mail order. So there's plenty of places available. Illegal Maneuvers is the story of a high-end car restorer by the name of Dan Gallagher. He runs across a woman by the name of Stephanie Mercer. She's a little tipsy, so he offers her a ride home and discovers that her husband is in a coma from a crash. The cops have written it off as a one-car accident where he fell asleep behind the wheel and ran off the road. She doesn't believe that. And as their friendship develops, he comes to believe her version, that something happened that made him crash. So he begins to investigate on his own, and being someone who's familiar with cars, he looks at the wrecked car and says, yeah, this was run off the road. And his investigation goes on, and eventually he unmasks the killer. And along the way, he and Stephanie have a growing relationship that ends up with them basically falling in love.
So before Illegal Maneuvers, did you write at all? When did you decide that you wanted to become a writer?
I've dabbled in writing probably since high school, but it was more just something to fill some time. And even in college, I played with it a little bit. And then, I guess about 1985 maybe, I kind of got into it a little more. And from there, it was just kind of an evolution. And about 1995, I really got bit. And I've really been working hard at it since then.
So the idea for Illegal Maneuvers, take me through that. Where did that idea first come from?
Oh boy, that's the idea. Where did it come from? I really can't say where it came from. I had a scene pop into my head of a man and woman in a bedroom, and the woman is getting dressed, and she's telling the man she can't see him anymore because when she's with him, she wants to be with her husband, and when she's with her husband, she wants to be with him. The scene never made it in the book, but you start thinking, okay, how did they meet? What brought them together? And it sort of evolves from there. And you come up with the idea for, okay, he was in a car crash, they met in a bar or something, and you tweak it, and bit by bit it comes together.
So talk to me a little bit about your writing routine. Do you have a specific time of day and night? Just talk to me a little bit about when you sit down at a computer and you got that cursor blinking at you, how do you get into routine?
Basically, I wait for motivation to strike when it comes to my writing. If the juices are flowing and my muse hasn't gone on vacation in Tahiti, I can sit down and I can type my heart out all day long. If not, I don't do any writing. And I've had days where I wrote for an hour, days I wrote for 2 hours. It just depends on how things are flowing. And when they're flowing, the problem is the ideas come so fast I can't type enough to keep up with them. So I don't really have, like I said, a writing routine.
So from start to finish, how long did it take you to write this weaving mystery with all these characters and the plot?
Oh, I'm going to say probably about 10 years. I worked on it, and then I would get an idea for something else, so I kind of set that off to the side and pick up another, start on something new, and then I'd run out of gas with that, and I'd have another idea and so forth. But I kept coming back to it because something about the whole idea drew me in, and I didn't want to give up on it. And whenever I came up with an idea, it would be like, I'd be walking down for the mail, for example, and, oh, I can do this. Well, as soon as I got home, I was down on the computer typing away, getting that idea down. So,
And talking about the characters, in particular, Dan and Steph, they have an interesting dynamic. Um, Steph is a soon-to-be widower, and Dan is coming in for rescue. Talk about their relationship and how it kind of gets a little complicated. And
well, it starts off with Dan seeing her in a bar. He stopped in for a beer, and she's at the other end of the bar, and she's a little tipsy. And the bartender cuts her off. So she takes off. She's going to go somewhere else. And Dan goes after her and convinces her to let him drive her home. And he senses something's troubling her, and he says, look, I'm a good listener. And then he kind of says, well, she's never going to call me again. Well, she does. And that's the start of their relationship. They start meeting semi-regularly whenever she just needs someone to talk to. And from there it goes from acquaintance to friendship to close friend and eventually to romantic connection there.
And I know you said before you wanted their relationship to be more organic.
Yes.
You didn't want it to be on page 1, and then page 5 they're in bed.
Right. I like to keep things as realistic as possible. You can't always do it. Sometimes you have to bend things a little bit. But I just find these relationships where a man and a woman meet on one page and 5 pages later they're in bed, it doesn't fly for me. So I wanted Dan and Stephanie's relationship to evolve as more so than to mutate, if you will, or something. I wanted a slower progression of their relationship.
You have some villains in this book, and we don't want to spoil it
Yeah.
for future readers who haven't read this book yet. But you write Dan and Steph a certain way, and then you have your villains. Is it fun for you to write those villains? Do you know who your killer is when you're creating this mystery?
No. I am what's called a pantser, and that's a person who sits down without an outline and just starts typing. I kind of like to discover what's going to happen along with my characters. I think that gives me a little more realistic reaction on their part because I'm like, oh, how about that? And then that character can say, oh, how about that too? I didn't really want the bad guys to be blatantly obvious, but I wanted them to make the reader go, is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? Some of them are a little more overtly obnoxious, I'll say, than others, but...
And what obstacles did you face writing the novel? And what I mean by that was, so you're sitting down, you're writing, you have some inspiration. Maybe the next day you don't have it, little hiccups. What obstacles specific to Illegal Maneuvers did you have?
Trying to keep the characters real, I think, was one of them. And getting the facts right. Being a car guy, for example, when I read a book and there's something wrong about a car, it just sets me off. It turns me off to the story, and it's like a broken trust. So I wanted a lot of that stuff to be dead on. I didn't want somebody to come back to me and say, hey, you can't, the 74 Monte Carlo doesn't have that, for example. So that and just keeping the momentum going. It's very hard to keep momentum going on a book. Very often you'll have an opening idea and maybe a closing idea where the story wraps up, but there's this big gap between those two, which they call the muddle in the middle. And it's a place where you have to keep the story going but not give away too much. And it's one of the toughest areas to write is actually the middle of the book.
Have you been happy with the feedback? And part 2 to that question is, how do you deal with negative criticism, naysayers of your work?
So far, every review I've had has been positive except for one. And that wasn't so much negative as the person said, I just didn't care for the characters. Well, that happens sometimes. You'll read 5 or 6 books by an author. And maybe you just don't care for the characters in one. It's not that it's a bad story. It's just you can't connect with the characters, I guess is the way to put it. That's the way I feel when I find I've read a book and want to give it a more negative review than a positive one. Very often it's because I couldn't relate or connect to the characters. I couldn't build an affinity to them. I have to care what happens to the character over the course of the story. And if I can't do that, it's hard for me to really get into the story. So the other thing is, not everybody likes the same thing. Some people like, within the mystery genre, there's probably 50 subgenres. And people who like cozy mysteries may not like the more gory ones, and so forth. So it's a matter of taste too. And they take the negative comments as that person's opinion, and they're entitled to it. And I'm not going to tell them wrong.
Would you agree or disagree that when somebody criticizes a character and doesn't like that character, in some way you've done your job? Like, for example, there's a few characters in your story. There's a few unsavory characters I do not like.
Well,
but that's not detrimental to the book itself. That was meant that way, right?
To some extent, yes. You want your reader to connect, again, with the characters, good and bad. You want the reader to say, come on, I hope Dan makes it. I hope they fall in love. And then you want him to say, I hope this guy gets his comeuppance. I hope he gets his ass kicked or whatever. As long as you're connecting with the character, the writer, I think, is doing the job. To an aspiring writer, for one thing, write. Write a lot. You're going to do it no matter what. I'm sure that guys like Stephen King and Michael Connelly, for example, write tons of stuff that never sees the light of day. The more you write, the better your skill is going to be, the better your technique is going to be. The other thing is read. Read, if you like mysteries like I do, read mysteries. If you like horror, read horror. See how the people who are published, who are successful in that genre, do it. And you're never going to exactly duplicate anybody's style, and you don't want to. You want to use them sort of as instructors to help you develop your own style.
Who influences Dave Freas?
Robert Parker, like I said. Michael Connelly, who tells fantastic stories, and he keeps it real too. His characters age as the stories go on. Carl Hyacin, because he's as funny as all get out. Let's see. There's so many of them. John Sanford's another one I like to read. Will Thomas, if you like mystery set at the turn of the century London, he's the guy to read. I mean, if he was a contemporary of Arthur Conan Doyle, he'd give him a run for his money. That's how good that guy is.
When you're writing a mystery, and you have all these characters, and there's a plot twist, how challenging is that alone to make sure that the character on page 43 said or did something on page 10? I'm sure there's a lot of proofreading, a lot of editing. Do you have help in those areas?
There is a lot of proofreading and editing that goes into that. Part of it is I'm lucky in that I can kind of keep general stuff like that in my head. And if I'm on page 250 and I'm writing something and I'm thinking, wait a minute, he wouldn't do that, I can go back and say, now somewhere around page 12 he did this or that. Some people take copious notes. They have pages and pages of information on each character that they can refer to. It just depends on which style works the best for you. So.
Describe a writer in your terms.
A writer. A writer is an introvert who wants to be noticed, I guess is the best way to put it. Most of your work is done alone, in the silence of an empty house or a private room or something like that. But when you're done, you want people to notice what you did. And to do that, you have to get out there and promote your books and promote yourself and make your presence known. And for an introvert, that's hard. I mean, that's like sticking an alcoholic in a bar and expecting him not to drink. It just it's tougher than can be.
You organize a writers group.
I
Talk to me about the writers group and how it helps you and how it helps others.
I didn't so much organize it as I fell into it. I was introduced to the writing group in 1995 by Marty Johnson. And there was a group of about 4 or 5 stalwarts that formed the group, were the core of the group at that time. And they welcomed me with open arms. It was like the first time you go in and there's all these people who are published and you're just a novice, getting your toes in the water. And they make you feel so welcome, and it's encouraging and it's emboldening. And over the years, some of the members have moved away or dropped out for one reason or another. And it kind of befell to me to keep the thing going. So,
and how long has that been? How long have you been doing this?
Since 95, it's been going. We, of course, had a big gap there with COVID, but we've pretty much met regularly since then. Payback, the second book that's coming out in October, I will hopefully have advanced reader copies of that available at the fair. Payback is the story of Rick Lafferty. He's a police detective in Philadelphia. He's fallen in love with another female detective by the name of Mary Connor. She is shot by a dirty cop. And he wants to investigate the shooting, but he's told to stand down because of their relationship. But he goes ahead and does it anyway, because he wants to catch this guy and make him pay for hurting Stephanie. What's her name again? Mary. For hurting Mary. At the same time, there's a woman that this dirty cop has been abusing sexually for a long time, and she's had it up to the eyeballs. So she wants him too. She wants to get him good. And there's also a woman who has been affiliated with a drug dealer, and he uses her sexual favors to encourage people to do what he wants, if you will. Without giving too much away, there's a city councilman that this woman spends a night with at the behest of the drug dealer. And that kind of the thing that pushes her over the edge to where she wants out. She wants to get away from this guy. But she knows she can't, because if she tries to get away, he'll come and kill her. So she has to come up with a way to do it and live.